The observation deck of the council station stretched 3 kilometers in diameter, a perfect circle of transparent alloy that revealed the breathtaking vastness of space in every direction. 700 alien representatives filled the tiered seating, their forms ranging from crystalline entities that chimed with each movement to massive creatures that resembled living mountains. The air processors worked overtime to accommodate 400 different atmospheric requirements, creating visible layers of gas that shifted and swirled like aurora borealis. Ambassador David Torres stood at the center platform, alone. The circular stage rotated slowly, ensuring every delegation could observe the human without obstruction. Above him, holographic displays showed Earth in excruciating detail. Cities, military installations, population centers, industrial complexes, everything laid bare for galactic judgment. Chancellor Vexenar of the Dominant Council occupied the highest throne, a position of authority that had remained unchanged for 6,000 years. His species, the Kalthari, had evolved in the crushing gravity of a superplanet, giving them densely packed bodies and a natural resistance to most forms of physical harm. When Vexenar spoke, his voice carried the weight of absolute power. Human Delegate David Torres, your species stands before this council charged with systematic violation of the integration protocols. You have been observed for 187 standard cycles. The evidence is overwhelming and irrefutable. David remained silent, his hands clasped loosely before him. He wore a simple black suit, no decorations, no weapons, no technology visible on his person. His dark eyes swept the assembly with calm assessment, as if he were the one conducting the evaluation. Councillor Renpa, whose aquatic species communicated through bioluminescent patterns, flickered into speech. The charges include unauthorized colonization of restricted sectors, development of weapon systems categorized as existential threat. Level 4, failure to submit to mandatory cultural adjustment programs, and deliberate concealment of technological capabilities. The gallery murmured in agreement. The Torvashi delegation, insectoid beings with compound eyes that saw in spectrums beyond human comprehension, clicked their approval. The gaseous nevori swirled in patterns that indicated satisfaction. Even the peaceful Helanoth, who had not engaged in conflict for 3 millennia, pulsed their agreement through telepathic channels. David finally spoke, his voice carrying clearly through the translation matrix. I acknowledge that you have listed charges. I do not acknowledge their validity. The chamber fell silent. Such direct contradiction of the council was unprecedented in recent memory. Vexenar leaned forward, his massive frame casting shadows across the platform. You deny the evidence before you? The surveillance records? The data collected by our observation platforms? No, David replied. I deny your authority to judge humanity based on standards we never agreed to follow. The reaction was immediate and explosive. Delegates surged to their feet, appendages waving, voices rising in a cacophony of outrage. The translation matrix struggled to keep pace with the volume of simultaneous speech. Silence. Vexenar's command cut through the chaos like a blade. When order returned, he fixed David with a stare that had made warlords surrender without a fight. Your species was observed entering the galactic stage. The integration protocols are not optional. They exist to prevent chaos, to ensure that emerging civilizations do not threaten the stability that has taken millennia to achieve. David nodded slowly. I understand your perspective. You've built something remarkable here. 700 species, countless worlds, all cooperating under a single governmental structure. It's impressive, he paused. It's also fragile. Explain yourself, Councillor Mora demanded. Her species, the Talvek, had evolved from pack hunters and still retained their predatory instincts despite 10,000 years of civilization. You dare call the greatest governmental achievement in galactic history fragile? Yes, David said simply. Because it's built on a foundation that only works when everyone agrees to play by the same rules. Your entire system depends on new species accepting your authority, submitting to your protocols, integrating into your structure. He turned slowly, addressing the entire assembly. But what happens when someone says no? Vexenar stood, his full height nearly twice that of a human. Then we enforce compliance. The Council maintains the largest peacekeeping force in known space precisely for such circumstances. 17,000 warships, supported by defense platforms that guard every major system. We have contained rebellions, suppressed pirate kingdoms, and pacified aggressive species without number. Against species who were already part of your system, David countered. Against criminals and rebels who were scattered, disorganized, operating without support or supply lines. You've never faced a unified, technologically advanced civilization that simply refuses to join your club. Till now, Counselor Renpa observed, her lights flickering with sudden understanding. David smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. Until now? The holographic displays shifted and new images appeared, not of Earth but of space itself. The void between stars where Council sensors had detected nothing, registered no threats, recorded no anomalies. For 187 cycles you watched us, David said. You observed our development, catalogued our expansion, tracked our ships. You saw exactly what we wanted you to see. He gestured, and the images magnified. What had appeared to be empty space now showed faint distortions, barely visible even with enhanced scanning. While you were counting our visible fleet, we were building another one. While you were monitoring our public communications, we were developing technologies you don't have detection methods for. While you were assuming we'd be impressed by your power, we were calculating exactly how to neutralize it. Impossible, Mora snarled. Our surveillance technology is the most advanced in the galaxy. We would have detected any significant military buildup. Your surveillance technology is designed to find things that emit energy signatures, create gravitational disturbances, or leave heat traces, David replied. We designed our systems to avoid all of those. We spent 50 years studying your detection methods through our own covert observation platforms. Then we built a fleet specifically engineered to be invisible to your sensors. Vexenar's expression darkened. You claim to have hidden an entire military force from the Council? Prove it. David touched a small device on his wrist. Already done. Check your tactical displays. Specifically, check the space within weapons range of this station. The Council's military advisors scrambled to their consoles. Seconds later, alarms began sounding throughout the chamber. The holographic displays shifted again, now showing the immediate vicinity of the Council station itself. 200 human warships had appeared, their stealth systems disengaging simultaneously. They surrounded the station in a perfect geometric pattern, each vessel positioned to provide overlapping fields of fire that would ensure no escape route existed. The chamber erupted into chaos. Delegates screamed in their native languages. Security forces rushed to defensive positions. Military commanders shouted conflicting orders. The carefully maintained atmosphere of controlled authority shattered like glass. You attacked the Council? Vexenar roared, and for the first time in his long career, there was genuine fear in his voice. No, David said calmly, seemingly unbothered by the pandemonium around him. We demonstrate. Your sensors are now recalibrated to detect our signature. Check the outer systems. Check the shipping lanes. Check the borders of your territory. More alarms, more frantic activity at the tactical consoles. More displays showing the truth that the Council had missed for nearly 2 centuries. Humanity had not just entered galactic space. They had infiltrated it. Their ships were everywhere. Hidden in plain sight, positioned at every strategic location throughout Council territory. They had mapped every installation, every defense platform, every supply route. They had accomplished in decades what should have taken centuries, and they had done it all while the Council watched Earth and congratulated themselves on keeping the dangerous humans contained. This is an act of war, Counselor Renpa stated, her bioluminescence flickering with distress patterns. No, David corrected. This is a demonstration of capability. If we wanted war, this station would already be debris. If we wanted to attack, we would have struck your shipyards, your industrial centers, your population hubs. We haven't fired a single shot. We've simply revealed that we could at any moment we choose, and there's nothing you could do to stop us. Vexenar slowly lowered himself back into his throne, his mind racing through scenarios and finding no acceptable outcomes. "What do you want? Respect," David said. "Recognition that humanity is not some primitive species that needs guidance and control. We don't need your integration protocols. We don't need your cultural adjustment programs. We don't need you to teach us how to behave in galactic society." He paused. "But we are willing to negotiate as equals for mutual coexistence and trade." "You hold this council hostage and call it negotiation?" Mora demanded. "I prefer to call it leveling the playing field," David replied. "You summoned me here to pass judgment on my species, to threaten us with containment or worse if we didn't submit to your authority. I came here to show you that the power dynamic you assumed doesn't actually exist. Now we can have an honest conversation about our future relationship, one based on mutual respect rather than assumed superiority." The silence that followed was profound. 700 species who had grown accustomed to being the ultimate authority in the galaxy suddenly confronted a reality they had never imagined. A species that matched their technology, exceeded their strategic planning, and refused to be intimidated by their numbers or their history. Vexenar closed his eyes for a long moment. When he opened them, something had changed in his expression. The absolute certainty was gone, replaced by a wary calculation. "You have made your point, Ambassador Torres. The Council will need time to deliberate on these new circumstances." "Take all the time you need," David said. "But understand this clearly. Those ships you see on your displays? They're a fraction of what we have available, and they're not here to threaten you. They're here to ensure that whatever happens next, humanity has a voice in the decision. We're not asking for permission to exist anymore. We're announcing that we already do, and we're strong enough to defend that existence against any challenge." He bowed slightly, a gesture of respect that somehow didn't diminish the underlying message. "I'll be in the diplomatic quarters when you're ready to talk." As equals, as David was escorted from the chamber, the council sat in stunned silence. Their carefully ordered galaxy had just been appended by a species that had entered the galactic stage less than 200 years ago. A species that had learned the rules, studied the players, and decided to rewrite the entire game. In the diplomatic quarters, David activated a secure channel. Admiral Patricia Kane appeared on the screen, her expression neutral, but her eyes sharp with anticipation. "Status?" she asked. "They're rattled. Scared but not panicked. Angry but not irrational. Exactly where we need them, and if they decide to fight anyway?" David's expression hardened. "Then we execute Protocol Cascade and show them what happens when you mistake patience for weakness." "But I don't think it'll come to that. They're bureaucrats and politicians, not warriors. Once they run the simulations, once they calculate the cost of actually trying to enforce their judgment, they'll choose negotiation." "You sound confident." "I am. Because we did something they never expected. We let them think they were in control, right up until the moment we revealed they never were. That kind of psychological shock changes everything. They'll negotiate now because the alternative is admitting they built an empire that couldn't handle one species saying no." The screen went dark, and David moved to the viewport, looking out at the council station and the vast assembly of alien civilizations it represented. Humanity had finally met the galactic community, had been judged and found wanting by the established powers, and humanity had smiled, shown its teeth, and changed the conversation entirely. The council deliberation chamber was considerably smaller than the Grand Assembly Hall, designed for privacy rather than spectacle. Only the 9 primary counselors occupied the circular table, each positioned equidistant from their peers. The holographic displays that dominated the center showed tactical projections, resource analyses, and probability matrices that all pointed toward the same uncomfortable conclusion: humanity was not bluffing. Chancellor Vexenar studied the data with growing unease. His species had evolved to process multiple threat assessments simultaneously, a survival trait from their predator-filled homeworld. Right now, every instinct screamed danger. "The tactical analysis is complete," announced Counselor Genmar, whose crystalline form refracted light in patterns that indicated deep concern. Human military technology is approximately equal to our own in most categories. In stealth, electronic warfare, and rapid deployment capabilities, they exceed our specifications by significant margins. How is that possible? Demanded Counselor Thrace, a being whose species had invented faster-than-light travel before humans had discovered agriculture. They've had access to interstellar space for less than 2 centuries. We've been refining our technology for millennia. Because they approach the problem differently, Counselor Renpa explained, her bioluminescent patterns flickering through complex calculations. We developed our military technology to maintain order, to project authority, to intimidate potential threats. They developed theirs to win wars against opponents using equivalent technology. Every system they built was designed to counter something equally sophisticated trying to kill them. Vexanar activated a specific file and a new display appeared. It showed the history of human warfare, compressed into a timeline that revealed a horrifying pattern. In the past 500 years, they have fought over 300 major conflicts. Not border skirmishes or police actions, but full-scale wars involving millions of combatants and weapons capable of destroying entire cities. They fought each other with a creativity and intensity that we've never witnessed in a single species. Barbaric, Mora muttered. Effective, Vexanar corrected grimly. While we were exploring the stars and building our civilization, they were engaged in continuous, brutal, innovative warfare against opponents who were just as intelligent and ruthless as themselves. Every tactic was countered, every weapon was met with a defense, every defense was overcome with a new weapon. They've spent centuries in an arms race with themselves, and now they've brought that accumulated knowledge to the galactic stage. Counselor Drenvas, whose gaseous form swirled with agitation, posed the question they were all thinking. What are our options? 3 realistic scenarios, Denmer replied, displaying them in order. First, we accept their terms and negotiate a treaty recognizing them as an independent power with equal standing. Second, we attempt to enforce our original judgment and engage them militarily. Third, we seek a compromise position where they partially integrate while maintaining some autonomy. The third option seems reasonable, Thrace suggested. They've already rejected it, Renpa noted. Ambassador Torres was explicit. They want full recognition as equals or they'll defend their independence by force. There is no middle ground in their proposal. Vexanar pulled up the military projections. Let's examine option 2. Total war with humanity. The displays showed multiple scenarios, each calculated with the Council's most advanced strategic computers. In every simulation, we eventually win through sheer numbers. We have 17,000 warships to their estimated 3,000. We have defense platforms at every major system. We have the industrial capacity of 700 species. But? Mora prompted, sensing the unspoken caveat. But the cost is catastrophic, Vexanar continued. Conservative estimates project we lose 60% of our peacekeeping fleet. 47 member worlds suffer significant damage from raids and attacks. Trade routes are disrupted for decades. Economic impact cascades throughout the Council for generations. He paused. And that assumes they fight a conventional war. If they employ asymmetric tactics, if they target civilian infrastructure, if they use weapon systems we haven't accounted for, the casualties could be exponentially higher. They wouldn't dare attack civilian targets, Thrace insisted. Even they must have some moral boundaries. Counselor Renpa brought up historical records from Earth. During their most recent global conflict, they developed weapons that could eliminate entire cities in single attacks. They used them. When faced with enemies who refused to surrender, they demonstrated a willingness to inflict unimaginable casualties to achieve victory. They don't celebrate this aspect of their history, but they don't deny it either. They are capable of extreme measures when they believe their survival is at stake. The chamber fell silent as each counselor absorbed the implications. They had built a galactic civilization on principles of cooperation, diplomacy, and measured force. They had forgotten what it meant to face an opponent who viewed warfare not as a last resort but as a refined science. There's another factor, Shemmer added quietly. Political cohesion. How many of our member species will actually support a war against humanity? We've maintained peace for so long that most civilizations have reduced their military capabilities to minimal levels. They depend on the Council fleet for protection. If we suffer significant losses fighting humans, we may face other challenges from species who've resented Council authority but feared our military power. Vexenar understood immediately. The Council's strength wasn't just military. It was the perception of invincibility, the belief that resistance was futile. If humanity shattered that perception, if they demonstrated that the Council could be fought and hurt, the entire power structure of galactic civilization could collapse. So we negotiate, Drenvas concluded. We give them what they want and hope they become reasonable partners. We negotiate from a position of weakness, Mora corrected bitterly. They've backed us into a corner with their display of force. Every species in the galaxy will know that humanity threatened the Council and we backed down. Our authority is compromised regardless of what we choose. Vexenar stood, his massive form commanding attention. Then we make it appear that integration was always possible for species that proved themselves worthy. We frame this not as a defeat but as humanity passing a test. We create a new category of membership, one that acknowledges exceptional circumstances. A face-saving measure, Thrace observed. A necessary one, Vexenar replied. We cannot afford the war, we cannot afford to appear weak, so we change the narrative. Humanity is not defying the Council. They're demonstrating why they deserve special consideration. We recognize their strength and welcome them as partners rather than subjects. Renpa's bioluminescence flickered with approval. It could work. We've never encountered a species quite like them before. Their rapid development, their military capability, their unwillingness to submit. We can frame these as unique circumstances requiring unique accommodation. Will the other species accept that explanation? Drenvas asked. They'll accept it more readily than they'll accept mobilization for a war that could devastate the Council, Vexenar said. Most species join the Council for stability and prosperity, not for conflict. When we explain the costs of enforcement versus the benefits of integration, they'll choose the path of least resistance. Counselor Mora remained unconvinced. And what about the precedent? What happens when the next emerging species sees that humanity gained equal status by threatening us? We'll face constant challenges to our authority. Then we make it clear that humanity's circumstances were exceptional and unrepeatable, Genmore suggested. We emphasize how rare it is for a species to achieve their level of capability so quickly. We make them the exception that proves the rule rather than a template for future challenges. Vexenar reviewed the proposals, calculating angles and outcomes with the speed his species was famous for. Prepare the diplomatic framework. We'll offer humanity a treaty recognizing their sovereignty within defined territorial boundaries. They gain independence and voting rights on Council matters that affect them. In exchange, they agree to certain restrictions on expansion rates and weapons development. And they provide military support for Council peacekeeping operations. They want to be treated as equals, not as contractors, Thrace pointed out, which is why we'll frame the military support as a partnership rather than an obligation, Vexenar explained. We're not commanding them to fight for us. We're inviting them to join peacekeeping operations as equals contributing to galactic stability. The distinction matters, especially to a species as proud as they've proven to be. The counselors debated details for another hour, refining the proposal until it offered enough concessions to satisfy humanity while maintaining enough Council authority to preserve their broader governmental structure. When they finally reached consensus, Vexenar sent for Ambassador Torres. David entered the deliberation chamber with the same calm confidence he had displayed in the assembly hall. He took the offered seat, noting how the circular arrangement ensured no one position was superior to any other. These beings understood symbolic gestures at least. Ambassador Torres, Vexenar began, The Council has deliberated on the new information you provided. We recognize that humanity's circumstances are unique and that our standard integration protocols may not be appropriate for your species. David listened without interrupting, evaluating every word for traps and opportunities. We propose a treaty of alliance rather than integration, Vexinar continued. Humanity would maintain full sovereignty over your current territories and internal governance. You would have voting representation in the Council on matters that directly affect your interests. In exchange, you would agree to certain limitations on expansion rates to prevent conflicts with existing territorial claims, and you would participate in joint peacekeeping operations when requested. Define limitations on expansion. David said immediately. Councillor Genmer projected a star map showing territorial boundaries. You may expand into any unclaimed systems at your discretion. For systems claimed by council members, you must negotiate directly with the claiming species rather than establishing presence by force. For systems in disputed or neutral zones, you must submit expansion proposals to the Council for arbitration to prevent conflicts. David studied the map carefully. The restrictions were reasonable, designed more to prevent accidental wars than to actually limit human growth. The galaxy was vast enough that even with these boundaries, humanity had room to expand for centuries. And the peacekeeping operations? He asked. Voluntary participation in council-authorized operations, Renpa explained. We would not command your forces, but we would request support when situations exceed our capabilities or when human perspective and expertise would be valuable. You would have the right to decline requests that conflict with your interests. So we're not your soldiers. We're your partners, David summarized. Precisely, Vexinar confirmed. David leaned back, considering. The offer was better than he had expected. The Council was genuinely trying to find a compromise rather than simply preserving their authority at all costs. That suggested flexibility, pragmatism, a willingness to adapt. It also suggested they had run the numbers on a war and didn't like the results. I need to consult with my government, David said. This treaty represents a fundamental shift in Earth's relationship with galactic civilization. I don't have authority to accept without approval. Understood, Vexinar replied. How long do you require? 72 hours. I'll need to send a detailed report, allow for debate, and receive formal authorization. Acceptable. While you deliberate, we will prepare the treaty documents for review. David stood, then paused. Chancellor Vexinar, may I speak candidly? Please. We didn't come here wanting conflict. We came here wanting respect. Everything we did, every ship we positioned, every demonstration we made, was designed to ensure you took us seriously. Not as children needing guidance, not as criminals needing punishment, but as equals deserving consideration. He met each counselor's gaze in turn. This treaty offers that. If my government approves it, I believe we can build something positive together. Humanity has a lot to learn about galactic civilization, and apparently, galactic civilization has some things to learn from humanity. Such as? Mora asked, genuinely curious despite her earlier hostility. That strength and cooperation aren't mutually exclusive, David replied. That different approaches to problems can coexist and even complement each other. That maybe, just maybe, a species that spent centuries fighting itself might have some useful perspective on preventing conflicts between different civilizations. He bowed respectfully to the assembly. I'll have your answer in 72 hours. After he left, the counselors sat in contemplative silence. Finally, Thrace spoke. He's right, you know. We did need to learn something. We've been so focused on maintaining the peace we built that we forgot how to deal with species that still remember conflict. We assumed our way was the only way, that everyone would eventually evolve to our standards. Perhaps that assumption needed challenging, Genmore agreed. Vexinar stood, signaling the session's end. In 72 hours, we'll know if this new chapter in galactic history begins with cooperation or conflict. I suggest we all hope for the former, because after seeing what humanity can do, I have no desire to discover what they will do if we force them to fight. The counselors departed, each carrying the weight of decisions that would shape the galaxy for generations to come. And throughout the council station, word spread quickly among the 700 species that something unprecedented had occurred. Humanity had challenged the council and survived. More than that, they had won. The communication delay between the council station and Earth meant that David's report took 6 hours to arrive through conventional, faster than light transmission. During that time, he remained in the diplomatic quarters, reviewing treaty language and preparing supplementary materials that would help Earth's leadership understand the full implications of what had been offered. He wasn't alone for long. Within 2 hours of the Council's proposal, representatives from a dozen different species requested private meetings. Some were genuinely curious about humanity. Others were opportunistic, seeing potential advantages in establishing early relationships with a species that had just proven themselves capable of challenging the Council itself. The first visitor was Ambassador Krell of the Novan Collective, a species of reptilian beings whose star systems bordered the outer edge of human expansion. Krell entered cautiously, his scaled form moving with the careful precision of someone expecting potential danger. "Ambassador Torres," Krell began, his translator converting his hissing speech into standard language. "I hope I'm not intruding." "Not at all," David replied, gesturing to a seat. "I'm assuming this is an AS?" "Official visit." Krell's mouth split in what might have been a smile. "Direct, I appreciate that. My government has been monitoring human expansion for the past 20 years. We've watched your colony ships entering systems near our borders. We've observed your mining operations, your research stations, your military patrols." "Concerned?" David asked neutrally. "Initially, yes. You expanded rapidly, aggressively, without seeking permission or establishing communication. We feared you might be another conquering species like the Verkai in our history." Krell paused. "But then we noticed something interesting. Whenever your ships encountered our border markers, they stopped. They didn't cross, didn't challenge, didn't push. You respected boundaries you had no legal obligation to honor." David nodded. "We respect strength and established presence. The Novan Collective was clearly developed enough to have defined territory and the means to defend it. We saw no reason to create conflict over space we didn't need." "Pragmatic," Krell observed. "Also rare among emerging species. Most are either too aggressive or too submissive. You seem to have found a middle path." He leaned forward. "The Collective would like to establish formal diplomatic relations with humanity, independent of whatever agreement you reach with the Council. We're interested in trade, cultural exchange, and possibly mutual defense arrangements." "Mutual defense?" David raised an eyebrow. "Against whom?" Krell's expression darkened. "The Council presents itself as a unified governmental body, but the reality is more complex. There are factions, power struggles, species that resent others receiving preferential treatment. The Novan Collective joined the Council 3 centuries ago because we saw no alternative. We've prospered under their structure, but we've also been restricted, controlled, limited in ways that serve the Council's interests rather than our own." "You want to use humanity as leverage," David said bluntly. "We want to use humanity as an example," Krell corrected. "You've proven that the Council's authority isn't absolute, that there are alternatives to complete submission. If you establish independence while maintaining trade relationships, you create a model other species might follow. Not rebellion, not war, but legitimate alternative governance." David considered this carefully. "You're talking about fundamentally changing the political structure of galactic civilization." "I'm talking about introducing competition to a monopolistic system," Krell replied. "The Council has been the only option for so long that they've become complacent, bureaucratic, slow to adapt. Perhaps having an alternative will make them more responsive to member species' needs. Or it could fracture galactic civilization into competing factions and lead to exactly the kind of widespread conflict the Council was created to prevent." David countered. Krell nodded acknowledgement. "Possible. but also possible that healthy competition produces better governance than unchallenged authority. Your own history suggests as much. From what we've studied, your most innovative periods occurred when multiple human nations competed with each other, forcing continuous improvement. Our most destructive periods, too, David reminded him. Balance, Krell said. Competition with cooperation. Independence with alliance. Exactly what you're negotiating with the Council right now. He stood. Think about my proposal. The Novan Collective doesn't want to overthrow the Council. We want to create options, alternatives, a galaxy where species have choices about how they participate in interstellar civilization. After Krell left, David made notes of the conversation. The political implications were staggering. If humanity became a focal point for species dissatisfied with Council governance, they could end up at the center of a much larger conflict than they were prepared to handle. On the other hand, having allies might be crucial if the Council's current reasonable approach shifted to something more hostile. The next visitor was very different. Envoy Salas of the Lumari arrived in a containment sphere, her energy-based form pulsing with patterns that indicated friendly intentions. The Lumari were one of the Council's oldest members, present at its founding 6,000 years ago. Ambassador Torres, I bring greetings from the Lumari Harmonies. Salas communicated through her sphere's translation system. We have observed your negotiations with great interest. I'm honored, David replied. The Lumari have a reputation as wise mediators. Any insights you can offer would be appreciated. Salas's form shifted to a pleased pattern. Wisdom comes from long observation and many mistakes. We have made both in abundance. She pulsed thoughtfully. The Council is afraid of you. This is good and bad? Explain? Fear motivates change, but it also motivates defensiveness, Salas said. Chancellor Vexinar and his colleagues have offered you a reasonable treaty because they fear the cost of war. This is rational. But fear also creates resentment, suspicion, a desire to regain lost authority. You must be careful that your victory today does not create enemies tomorrow. David appreciated the candor. What would you recommend? Make them need you, Salas advised. The treaty offers military cooperation. Embrace this. Demonstrate that humanity adds value to the Council beyond threat potential. Show them you can be partners in maintaining galactic stability, not just opponents capable of disrupting it. Build relationships with individual species, create positive interactions. Give them reasons to want humanity integrated into galactic civilization rather than existing parallel to it. Win hearts and minds, David summarized. An apt phrase. The Council governs through authority and tradition. Humanity can influence through innovation and capability. If you become valuable allies rather than merely formidable opponents, your position becomes secure regardless of military balance. But we can't appear weak, David noted. The moment we look vulnerable, species like the Verkai or the Kresh Dominion might test us? Correct, Salas agreed. Strength must be maintained. But strength can be demonstrated through protection as well as threat. Help defend a smaller species from pirates. Assist with natural disasters. Contribute technology that improves lives. These actions build reputation just as effectively as military displays, and they create gratitude rather than fear. David made more notes. The Lumari perspective was valuable, coming from a species with millennia of diplomatic experience. May I ask why you're helping us? What does the Lumari Harmonies gain from humanity's success? Salas's form pulsed with what might have been amusement. The galaxy grows stagnant under a single governmental model. We Lumari have seen this before, in our own history before we reach the stars. Monopolistic control eventually leads to calcification, a resistance to change that becomes dangerous when circumstances shift. Your arrival introduces new energy, new perspectives, new possibilities. We believe this is healthy for galactic civilization, even if the process is uncomfortable. She paused, her energy patterns becoming more serious. Also, we see in humanity echoes of our own past. We too were warlike once, competitive, aggressive. We evolved beyond it through 10,000 years of directed cultural development. But we remember what we were, and we wonder if perhaps we gave up something valuable in the process. Perhaps not all species need to follow the same evolutionary path. Perhaps diversity of thought serves galactic civilization better than uniform peace. That's a controversial position, David observed, which is why I'm speaking to you privately rather than in the council chamber. Solis replied with another pulse of amusement. Official Lumari policy supports the council fully. Personally, I'm curious to see what happens when the galaxy gets shaken up a bit. After Salas departed, David received 5 more visitors over the next several hours. Each brought different perspectives, different proposals, different warnings. The Kethanar wanted technology exchange. The Pulvas needed help with a territorial dispute. The Gendari offered intelligence about council faction dynamics. The Trevkin warned about species that would see humanity as a threat to be eliminated. The Hervans simply wanted to understand what made humans so different from every other species they'd encountered. By the time Earth's response came through, David had a much clearer picture of the political landscape he was navigating. The Council wasn't a monolithic entity, but a complex web of relationships, alliances, rivalries, and competing interests. Humanity's emergence had disrupted established patterns, creating opportunities and dangers in equal measure. The message from Earth was brief and unambiguous. President Helena Vasquez appeared on the secure channel, her expression showing the weight of leadership. Ambassador Torres, the Cabinet has reviewed your report and the Council's proposal. We are authorized to proceed with treaty negotiations with the following stipulations. First, we maintain full control over our internal governance with no Council oversight or interference. Second, our participation in peacekeeping operations must be genuinely voluntary with no penalties for declining requests. Third, we require clear definition of our expansion boundaries to prevent future disputes. Fourth, we insist on technology sharing being reciprocal, not one-directional. She paused, her eyes intense even across the light years. You've done well, David. You've given us a path forward that preserves our independence while opening doors to galactic civilization. Don't let them backtrack on the fundamentals. If they try to insert restrictions that compromise our sovereignty, walk away. We'll face whatever comes rather than accept subjugation disguised as integration. The message ended, and David felt the weight of responsibility settle more firmly on his shoulders. He was negotiating not just for his generation, but for the future of humanity's place among the stars. He requested a meeting with Chancellor Vexanar. Within an hour, he was back in the deliberation chamber, facing the 9 counselors who would decide whether to accept Earth's conditions. Chancellor, I have Earth's response to your proposal, David began. They're prepared to sign a treaty with 4 specific conditions that must be addressed. He outlined each stipulation, watching the counselors' reactions carefully. Some were expected. Others clearly caused concern. The expansion boundaries can be clearly defined, Vexanar said after hearing the list. Participation in peacekeeping being voluntary is already part of the proposal. Internal governance remaining completely independent is acceptable, though we would request notification of major policy changes that might affect galactic stability. Notification. Not approval? David clarified. Correct. We're not seeking authority over your internal decisions, merely awareness to prevent surprises. And the technology sharing? David pressed. This was where the counselors showed hesitation. Counselor Thrace spoke carefully. The Council has access to technologies developed over millennia by 700 species. Humanity has been in space for 2 centuries. The exchange cannot possibly be equal in volume. But it can be equal in value, David countered. We may not have the breadth of your collective knowledge, but we have depth in certain areas. Our military technology, our stealth systems, our approaches to problems that you haven't encountered because you solve them differently. We're not asking for your entire database. We're asking for technology sharing to be a reciprocal relationship rather than a one-way education program. Counselor Gemmer's crystalline form refracted light in thoughtful patterns. Specific areas of exchange could be negotiated. Military technology would be sensitive, but industrial techniques, medical advances, agricultural methods, these could be shared without security concerns. And in exchange, humanity would share what exactly? Mora asked skeptically. David smiled. Our expertise in asymmetric warfare, for one. Your peacekeeping forces are designed to overwhelm through superior force. They're effective against pirates and rebels, but what happens when you face an opponent who won't engage in direct combat? Who uses guerrilla tactics, cyber warfare, psychological operations? We can teach you how to counter threats that don't play by conventional rules. The counselors exchanged glances. The value proposition was clear. The galaxy had been peaceful for so long that most species had forgotten how to fight wars that couldn't be won through simple force superiority. Humanity's recent history gave them expertise the Council lacked. There's precedent for specialized knowledge exchange, Renpa noted. The talkers shared their bioengineering advances in exchange for Navori dimensional physics. If we frame human military expertise as similarly specialized knowledge, the exchange becomes balanced. Vexenar made a decision. We can accept these conditions. The treaty will guarantee human sovereignty, voluntary participation in peacekeeping, clearly defined expansion boundaries, and reciprocal technology exchange in areas of mutual benefit. He paused. There is one additional element we would like to include. Which is? David asked warily. A formal mutual defense clause. If humanity is attacked by forces outside the Council, we commit to their defense. If Council members are attacked by forces humanity's military is better equipped to handle, you commit to provide support. Not integration, but genuine alliance. David hadn't expected this. It was a significant commitment from both sides, transforming the relationship from mere tolerance to actual partnership. It was also risky. It could drag humanity into conflicts they weren't prepared for, or obligate them to defend species they barely knew. It was also an opportunity. Real allies, backed by the industrial might and population of 700 species, in exchange for human military expertise and support. I'll need to consult with Earth again, David said. This goes beyond the original proposal. Understood, Vexenar replied. But consider this, Ambassador. We could have offered you independence and isolation. Instead, we're offering you partnership and integration as equals. That's not just political calculation. It's recognition that humanity has something valuable to contribute to galactic civilization, and that we're stronger together than separate. David returned to his quarters and sent another report to Earth. The mutual defense clause would spark intense debate, he knew. But it was also exactly the kind of opportunity that could transform humanity's position from isolated newcomers to genuine players in galactic politics. The question was whether Earth would be willing to accept the responsibilities that came with that position. The debate on Earth lasted 18 hours. David received periodic updates as the discussion ranged across every level of government. Military leaders assessed the strategic implications. Diplomats evaluated the political ramifications. Economic advisors calculated the trade benefits. Intelligence agencies warned about potential entanglements. Civilian leadership weighed the fundamental question of whether humanity was ready to become true participants in galactic affairs rather than observers on the periphery. Finally, President Vasquez returned to the communication channel, this time accompanied by Fleet Admiral Patricia Kane and Secretary of State William Chun. We've reached a consensus, Ambassador Torres, Vasquez began. The mutual defense clause is acceptable with one critical modification. We require clear definitions of what constitutes an attack requiring response. We will not be dragged into internal council disputes or conflicts between member species. We will respond to external threats and clear acts of aggression, but we reserve the right to make case-by-case determinations. Admiral Kane leaned forward. Militarily, this alliance gives us access to intelligence networks, resource sharing, and strategic positioning throughout the galaxy. It transforms our defensive posture from isolated to integrated. The benefits outweigh the risks, provided we maintain our independence in actual decision-making. Secretary Chun added his perspective. Diplomatically, this positions us as founding partners in a new model of galactic cooperation rather than either subjects or outsiders. It gives us legitimacy, access, and influence we couldn't achieve through isolation. It also creates obligations and expectations we'll need to manage carefully. Vasquez concluded. Negotiate the mutual defense clause with clear parameters defining scope and response requirements. If they accept those terms, you have authorization to sign the treaty on behalf of Earth and her colonies. Congratulations, Ambassador. You're about to make history. David took a moment to absorb the magnitude of what he was about to do. Every species reached this moment eventually, the point where they transitioned from isolated civilization to participant in the broader galactic community. How that transition occurred shaped everything that followed. Humanity was choosing to enter as equals, not subjects. As partners, not students. As contributors, not recipients. It was risky, ambitious, and entirely consistent with human nature. He requested an immediate meeting with the Council. Within 30 minutes, he was back in the deliberation chamber, facing the 9 counselors who would either accept Earth's terms or condemn both sides to a conflict nobody wanted. Chancellor Vexinar. Members of the Council, David began formally. Earth has reviewed the mutual defense proposal and finds it acceptable with specific clarifications regarding scope and implementation. He outlined the requirements. Clear definitions of what constituted an attack requiring response. Explicit exclusion of internal council disputes from the mutual defense obligation. Case-by-case evaluation rights for both parties before committing forces. Transparency requirements for intelligence sharing related to potential threats. The counselors listened carefully. When David finished, they conferred among themselves in rapid, private communication channels that excluded external observation. After several minutes, Vexinar spoke. Your clarifications are reasonable and actually strengthen the alliance structure by preventing misunderstandings. We accept these terms. The mutual defense clause will include the parameters you've specified. Counselor. Renpa added, we should also establish a joint command structure for coordinating responses when both human and council forces are deployed. Not a hierarchical command, but a coordination framework ensuring we work together effectively rather than interfering with each other. Agreed, David said. We can work out the details in supplementary protocols. Counselor Gemmer projected the treaty document in its final form. Hundreds of pages of legal language, technical specifications, and diplomatic formality compressed into a holographic display that rotated slowly between the participants. This document represents a new model of galactic cooperation, Gemmer explained. The Treaty of Alliance and Mutual Recognition between humanity and the Galactic Council. It grants Earth and her colonies full sovereignty and independence. It establishes reciprocal defense commitments within defined parameters. Reach frameworks for technology exchange, trade relations, and cultural interaction. Most importantly, it recognizes humanity as an equal partner in galactic affairs rather than a subordinate member requiring integration. David reviewed the document carefully, cross-referencing it against the conditions Earth had specified. Everything was present. The fundamental principles were intact. The language was clear and specific enough to prevent later reinterpretation. I find the treaty acceptable, he said. I'm authorized to sign on behalf of Earth, her colonies, and humanity as a whole. The formality of the signing ceremony surprised David, the small deliberation chamber. Transformed as representatives from all 700 council, species were summoned to witness the historic moment. The circular table was replaced with a raised platform where the treaty document appeared in physical form. A crystalline tablet that would record the agreement permanently. Chancellor Vexinar spoke to the assembled audience, his voice carrying the weight of 6,000 years of galactic civilization. Today marks a unique moment in Council history. For the first time, we welcome a species not through integration, but through alliance. Humanity has demonstrated capability, determination, and the strength to stand as equals among us. Rather than resist this reality, we embrace it. Rather than enforce submission, we offer partnership. He turned to David. Ambassador Torres, by signing this treaty, humanity commits to upholding galactic stability, defending against common threats, and contributing to the prosperity of all spacefaring civilizations. Do you accept these responsibilities on behalf of your species? I do, David replied clearly. And the Council, by accepting this treaty, commits to recognizing human sovereignty, defending humanity against aggression, and treating Earth as an equal partner in galactic affairs. We acknowledge that different species may approach civilization through different paths, and that strength and cooperation can coexist. Vexinar placed his mark on the crystalline tablet, a complex pattern that encoded his biological signature and official authority. Then he gestured for David to do the same. David approached the tablet and pressed his hand against the surface. The crystal scanned his genetic code, his biometrics, his authorization credentials transmitted from Earth. When it confirmed his identity and authority, the treaty was sealed. The chamber erupted in a mixture of reactions. Some species celebrated the peaceful resolution. Others appeared uncertain about the implications. A few clearly disapproved of humanity receiving such favorable treatment. But all recognized that something fundamental had changed in the political structure of the galaxy. After the ceremony, David was surrounded by representatives wanting to establish relationships with humanity. Trade proposals, cultural exchange programs, technology partnerships, research collaborations. The offers came so rapidly that he had to promise follow-up meetings rather than addressing each immediately. Ambassador Krell of the Novan Collective approached with his distinctive, careful movements. Congratulations, Ambassador Torres. You've accomplished something remarkable. Most species spend centuries working toward the position you've achieved in months. We had motivation, David replied, and apparently the right combination of capability and timing. Don't minimize what you've done, Krell said seriously. You've changed the possibilities for every species in the galaxy. The Council's authority was absolute because no one could challenge it. You've proven that strength, properly applied, can negotiate rather than simply submit. That lesson will resonate across civilizations. Envoy Solace of the Lumari drifted over in her containment sphere. Well done, Ambassador. You followed the path of making them need you rather than simply fear you. The mutual defense clause was brilliant. It transforms you from potential threat to valuable ally in a single provision. It was their suggestion, David admitted. Which makes it even better, Solace replied. They convinced themselves that alliance serves their interests. Much more stable than a treaty forced through intimidation. Her energy form pulsed with satisfaction. I believe this will be good for the galaxy. Fresh perspective, new energy, healthy competition for the Council's comfortable monopoly. Over the next several hours, David conducted dozens of brief meetings, establishing initial contacts and laying groundwork for future relationships. When he finally returned to his quarters, exhausted but satisfied, he found a message waiting from Admiral Kane. Ambassador Torres, the treaty has been received and ratified by Earth government. The news is being released to the public now. You should know that reaction is overwhelmingly positive. People are proud that humanity negotiated as equals rather than accepting subjugation. There are concerns about the mutual defense obligations, but overall, there's a sense that we've secured our place in the galaxy on our own terms. Kane paused, her expression becoming more serious. Now comes the hard part. Living up to what you've promised. The Council will be watching closely to see if we can actually contribute as much as we claimed. Other species will be testing our resolve, our capabilities, our commitment. We have maybe a year before someone challenges us in a way that requires action rather than words. Then we'd better be ready, David replied to the recording. Because the galaxy just learned that humanity doesn't make promises it can't keep. He looked out the viewport at the Council station and the vast assembly of civilizations it represented. Humanity had arrived, not as students or subjects, but as partners and allies. The treaty guaranteed their independence and recognized their strength, but paper agreements only mattered as long as both sides found them valuable. The real test would come when circumstances changed, when conflicts arose, when the carefully negotiated terms faced the messy reality of galactic politics. Humanity had won its place at the table. Now they had to prove they deserved to stay there. On Earth, celebrations erupted in every major city as news of the treaty spread. People gathered in streets, in public squares, in virtual forums to discuss what it meant for humanity's future. Some celebrated the diplomatic victory. Others worried about the military obligations. Many simply felt pride that their species had confronted the galaxy's most powerful governing body and emerged with dignity intact. In military installations across human space, commanders began reviewing the treaty's defense commitments and adjusting strategic planning accordingly. Alliance meant coordination, joint operations, shared intelligence. It meant preparing not just to defend human interests but to contribute to galactic stability. In research facilities, scientists eagerly anticipated access to alien technologies and knowledge. The reciprocal exchange provisions meant humanity would finally have legitimate channels for learning about the broader universe while sharing their own discoveries. In colonies scattered across dozens of star systems, settlers discussed expansion opportunities within the newly defined boundaries. The treaty opened vast regions of space for human exploration and development, while preventing conflicts over disputed territories. Throughout human civilization, people recognized that everything had changed. They were no longer alone, no longer isolated, no longer uncertain about their place in the cosmic community. They were partners in galactic civilization, with all the opportunities and responsibilities that entailed. Back on the council station, Chancellor Vexinar reviewed reports from his intelligence services. The initial assessments of human military capability had been accurate. The strategic analysis of potential conflict outcomes had been sound. The decision to negotiate rather than enforce had been correct, but there were new concerns. Multiple species had approached human representatives with proposals that bypassed council authority. The Novan Collective was clearly hoping to use humanity as leverage for greater autonomy. Several smaller species saw opportunity in establishing direct relationships with this new power. Even some major civilizations were reconsidering their relationship with the Council now that alternatives existed. "We've opened a door we may not be able to close," Councillor Mora observed during a private session. "We couldn't keep it closed anyway," Vexinar replied. "Humanity would have forced it open eventually. Better to control the opening than to have it smashed in our faces. Do you trust them?" Thrace asked. Vexinar considered the question carefully. "I trust that they'll act in their own interests, same as every species. I trust that they're capable of following through on their commitments. I trust that they understood the message we sent by offering alliance rather than demanding submission." He paused. "But I also trust that they're ambitious, competitive, and willing to challenge established norms. We need to watch them closely and ensure this alliance actually serves our interests, not just theirs. And if it doesn't?" Mora pressed. "Then we adapt," Vexinar said. "The galaxy survived 6,000 years of evolution and change. It will survive humanity. But the process may be more interesting than we're accustomed to." Councillor Renpa's bioluminescence flickered with amusement. "Interesting times, as the humans say. Their own curse and blessing combined." "Indeed," Vexinar agreed. "We live in interesting times now, whether we wanted them or not." 3 weeks after the treaty signing, humanity received its first test. A distress signal reached Council monitoring stations from the Velic system, a minor colony. World populated by the peaceful Hellenith species. Pirate forces had overwhelmed the minimal system defenses and were demanding tribute in exchange for not destroying civilian infrastructure. The Council's nearest peacekeeping fleet was 6 days away at maximum speed. Protocol dictated a response within 48 hours to prevent escalation. Chancellor Vexinar faced an uncomfortable choice. He could order the distant fleet to accelerate beyond safe parameters, risking equipment damage and crew exhaustion. Or he could invoke the new alliance and request human assistance. He chose the latter, partly because it was tactically sensible and partly because he wanted to see how humanity would respond to their first real obligation under the treaty. The message reached Admiral Kane within an hour. She reviewed the tactical data, consulted with her staff, and made a decision that would set the tone for future cooperation. "Deploy Battle Group 7, she ordered. Transit time to Velic system is 90 minutes. Rules of engagement are to neutralize the pirate forces with minimal collateral damage. The Haloneth are civilian populations with no military capability. Protect them." Commander James Rutger received his orders aboard the cruiser Defiant, flagship of Battle Group 7. His force consisted of 3 cruisers, 5 destroyers, and 2 support vessels. Against an unknown number of pirates operating captured merchant ships retrofitted with weapons, it should be overwhelming force, but this wasn't just a military operation. It was humanity's first action as Council allies. Every species in the galaxy would be watching to see how humans conducted themselves when protecting someone else's interests. "All ships, prepare for jump," Rutger commanded. "We're going to make an impression, people. Professional, effective, decisive. Show them what human peacekeeping looks like." The battle group entered faster than light transit with the precision that came from centuries of military refinement. 90 minutes later, they emerged in the Velic system, sensors immediately cataloging the tactical situation. 7 pirate vessels orbited the colony world, their weapons locked on population centers. They were using captured Velic orbital platforms as shields, making direct assault risky for the civilians below. Smaller craft were shuttling between the surface and the pirate ships, loading stolen cargo and captured Haloneth hostages. Rutger evaluated the situation with the cold calculation that defined human military doctrine. Tactical analysis complete. Pirates are using standard intimidation tactics, relying on the Council's cautious approach to minimize civilian casualties. They expect negotiation, delay, eventually either payment or a slow siege that gives them time to escape. His tactical officer nodded. Standard pirate playbook. They've probably done this before and gotten away with it. They haven't fought humans before, Rutger replied. Communications, send the following message on all channels. This is Commander James Rutger of the Earth Alliance Battle Group 7, operating under Galactic Council authority. You are ordered to release all hostages, surrender your vessels, and submit to arrest. You have 5 minutes to comply. The pirates' response came quickly, translated through the universal communication matrix. Earth vessels, you are outnumbered and outpositioned. We hold civilian infrastructure hostage. Withdraw or we begin destroying population centers. Rutger smiled grimly. Weapons, do you have firing solutions for all 7 pirate vessels? Yes, sir. Precision strikes calculated to disable propulsion and weapons, while avoiding damage to the orbital platforms they're hiding behind. And the shuttlecraft? Tracking all of them. We can intercept before they reach the pirate ships. Execute on my mark. All vessels, coordinated strike. Neutralize the pirates in 30 seconds, capture the shuttles intact, secure the hostages. Rutger paused, letting the gravity of the moment settle over his crew. This is what we trained for. Show them why humanity earned that treaty, Mark. Battle Group 7 moved with speed that shocked the pirates and impressed the watching Council observers. Human warships didn't maneuver like Council vessels. They didn't position for intimidation or prepare for extended engagements. They simply executed with brutal efficiency. Precision weapons fire disabled all 7 pirate vessels in 18 seconds. The shots came from angles the pirates hadn't thought possible, threading through gaps in their defensive positioning that shouldn't have existed. Advanced targeting systems calculated trajectories that avoided the orbital platforms while still striking vulnerable points on the pirate ships simultaneously. Human destroyers intercepted the shuttles before they could reach the relative safety of their motherships. Tractor beams locked onto the smaller craft, dragging them away from potential conflict zones. While Marines prepared for boarding actions, the entire engagement lasted, 42 seconds from first shot to complete pirate capitulation. No civilian casualties. No damage to orbital infrastructure. No escape for the aggressors. Rutger opened communications with the lead pirate vessel. Your weapons are disabled, your propulsion is offline, and your escape routes are blocked. Surrender your hostages immediately or we will board your vessels and take them by force. You have 2 minutes. The pirates, realizing they had grossly miscalculated their opposition, released the hostages without further resistance. Human Marines boarded the disabled vessels, secured the criminals, and established humanitarian aid operations for the traumatized Halenith civilians on the planet below. The colony's leadership watched in stunned amazement as the human fleet systematically resolved in minutes a crisis that would have taken the council days to address with similar effectiveness. The Halanith governor sent a message of gratitude that was transmitted throughout council space. The humans arrived like avenging spirits, fought with precision we have never witnessed, and treated our people with kindness and respect throughout the rescue operation. We are honored to have such allies protecting our borders. The response across galactic civilization was immediate and varied. Species that had doubted humanity's military claims now had visual evidence of their capability. The pirate networks that had grown comfortable operating in council space suddenly faced a new type of opponent, who wouldn't negotiate, wouldn't delay, and wouldn't accept casualties as inevitable. Chancellor Vexinar reviewed the operational recording with his council colleagues, noting every detail of the human response. They didn't grandstand. They didn't take unnecessary risks. They simply solved the problem with maximum efficiency and minimum collateral damage. This is what military competence actually looks like. Counselor Mora acknowledged grudgingly, I may have underestimated them. Their tactical coordination exceeded anything I've seen from peacekeeping forces in decades. Because they're not peacekeeping forces, Thrace observed. They're warfighting forces conducting a peacekeeping operation. The distinction matters. They didn't arrive to intimidate the pirates into surrender. They arrived prepared to destroy them if necessary and hoped surrender would make it unnecessary. Counselor Gemmer's crystalline form refracted light in thoughtful patterns. We should study their approach. Perhaps the Council's military doctrine has become too focused on minimizing conflict at the expense of actual effectiveness. The humans demonstrate that swift, decisive action can actually reduce overall casualties by preventing escalation. Renpa's bioluminescence flickered with agreement. The pirate problem has been growing for years because our response times are slow and our engagement rules are cautious. Pirates exploit this, knowing they have time to escape before we commit to action. Humans don't give them that time. Over the following weeks, humanity received 7 more requests for assistance from the Council. Not all were combat situations. Some involved humanitarian aid, natural disaster response, or technical expertise for infrastructure repair. In each case, human forces responded with the same efficiency they had shown at Velik. A mining accident on a Cathanar colony world brought human rescue teams with advanced drilling equipment and medical support. They extracted trapped miners that local authorities had considered lost, using techniques developed in Earth's own dangerous mining operations. A plague outbreak among the Trevkin triggered a human medical response combining advanced treatment protocols with aggressive quarantine measures. The spread was contained in days rather than the weeks typical for Council health services. Navigational beacon failure in a critical shipping lane brought human engineers with innovative solutions that restored functionality and improved reliability. Beyond original specifications, each successful operation built humanity's reputation and reinforced the value of the Alliance. Species that had been skeptical about dealing with the aggressive newcomers now actively requested human assistance. The Council, which had worried about humanity becoming a destabilizing influence, discovered they had gained a remarkably effective partner, but not everything went smoothly. The incident that would define the limits of the Alliance occurred 3 months after the treaty signing. The Kresh Dominion. a militaristic empire that occupied the galactic rim and maintained tense relations with the Council, began expanding into disputed territories. Their forces seized control of an uninhabited star system that both the Kresh and the Novan Collective claimed historical rights to. The Novan Collective appealed to the Council for support. Chancellor Vexenar faced a diplomatic nightmare. The disputed system was technically outside clear Council jurisdiction, but the Novan Collective was a member species entitled to protection. However, enforcing their claim risked war with the Kresh Dominion, something the Council had avoided for centuries through careful diplomacy. Ambassador Krell requested a meeting with David Torres, who had remained at the Council station as Earth's permanent representative. They met in neutral territory, away from official channels and monitoring systems. Ambassador Torres, the Novan Collective needs your help, Krell began without preamble. The Council will not act against the Kresh because they fear open conflict. But under your mutual defense treaty, you could support our claim independently of Council decision-making. David listened carefully, already seeing the trap. You want us to fight your war because the Council won't? I want you to honor the principle that aggressive expansion should be opposed, Krell corrected. The Kresh are testing boundaries, seeing how far they can push before someone stops them. If they succeed here, they'll continue expanding until they threaten multiple Council members. Better to stop them now, in a peripheral system, than later when the stakes are higher. Or better to find a diplomatic solution that doesn't require military action, David countered. The Kresh have legitimate historical claims to that system just as you do. Maybe neither of you should control it exclusively. Krell's scaled features showed frustration. So humanity will respond to pirates, but not to aggressive empires? You'll protect the weak, but not enforce justice? We'll protect our allies when they're genuinely threatened, David replied. But we won't be manipulated into conflicts that serve someone else's territorial ambitions. The Mutual Defense Clause excludes internal Council disputes precisely because we don't want to become mercenaries for species pursuing their own agendas. The Kresh expansion threatens galactic stability, Krell insisted. Then the Council should address it through their existing frameworks, David said firmly. We're allies, not enforcers. We'll support actions authorized through proper channels. But we won't let individual species invoke the alliance to bypass Council authority. Krell left the meeting dissatisfied. But David knew he had made the right decision. If humanity allowed themselves to be drawn into every territorial dispute and political conflict, they would quickly exhaust their resources and goodwill. The alliance had to mean something specific, not serve as a blank check for anyone claiming threat. He reported the conversation to Earth leadership and to Chancellor Vexenar. The latter appreciated humanity's restraint more than David had expected. You were wise to decline, Vexenar told him during a private meeting. The Kresh situation requires careful diplomacy, not military intervention. If humanity had responded to the Novan request, we would have faced a war that could have fractured the entire Council. Your restraint demonstrated that you understand the difference between strength and recklessness. Will the Novan Collective see it that way? David asked. Probably not immediately, Vexenar admitted. But they'll understand eventually. And more importantly, other species will recognize that humanity doesn't act rashly, doesn't allow itself to be manipulated, and can be trusted to exercise judgment rather than simply flexing military power. The Kresh situation was eventually resolved through negotiation. The disputed system was designated as neutral territory administered jointly by both claimants, satisfying neither party completely but preventing armed conflict. Humanity's refusal to intervene was noted across galactic civilization and actually strengthened their reputation as reliable allies rather than aggressive expansionists. 6 months after the treaty signing, David Torres received an unexpected visitor. Chancellor Vexenar himself came to the diplomatic quarters, without his usual entourage of aides and advisors. Ambassador Torres, I wanted to speak with you personally. Away from official protocols and recording systems, Vexenar began. That sounds ominous, David replied with a slight smile. Not ominous, merely reflective, Vexenar said. He moved to the viewport, looking out at the stars. When your species first came to our attention, I advocated for immediate containment. I believed you were dangerous, unpredictable, a threat to the stability we had worked millennia to achieve. I was prepared to enforce compliance through overwhelming force. He turned back to David. I was wrong? Not about your capabilities, but about what those capabilities meant. You are dangerous, but not in the way I feared. You're dangerous to complacency, to stagnation, to the comfortable assumptions that come from unchallenged authority. You forced us to re-examine our approach to governance, military operations, even diplomacy. Should I apologize for disrupting your comfortable galaxy? David asked with amusement. You should accept my thanks for reminding us that strength and cooperation aren't mutually exclusive, Vexenar replied. The council grew soft over millennia of peace. We forgot that peace must be defended, that stability requires strength, that good intentions alone don't prevent conflict. You've reminded us of these truths and perhaps saved us from challenges we weren't prepared to face. David was genuinely surprised by the admission. That's remarkably candid, Chancellor. I'm old enough to recognize when I need to learn from others, Vexenar said. Humanity has given the galaxy something valuable. Not just military capability or technological innovation, but a different perspective on how to approach problems. You compete while cooperating, maintain strength while seeking peace, challenge assumptions while building partnerships. It's a philosophy the Council needed to witness. He extended his massive hand toward David. Thank you for not destroying us when you could have. Thank you for choosing alliance over dominance. Thank you for being better than I initially feared. David shook the offered hand, feeling the weight of millennia of history behind the gesture. Thank you for giving us a chance to prove we were worth negotiating with. A lot of civilizations in your position would have chosen pride over pragmatism. A lot of civilizations wouldn't have survived that choice, Vexenar replied. Which is why I'm grateful you forced us to be smarter than our instincts. After Vexenar departed, David sent a comprehensive report to Earth. Humanity had successfully navigated its first year as participants in galactic civilization. They had proven their military effectiveness, demonstrated diplomatic restraint, built positive relationships with dozens of species, and established themselves as valuable allies. But challenges remained. The Kresh Dominion watched humanity with hostile interest, seeing them as potential rivals for regional dominance. Pirate networks adapted to human tactics, making them less effective over time. Internal council politics still viewed human independence as threatening to traditional authority structures. Most significantly, humanity itself struggled with the implications of galactic citizenship. Earth's population debated expansion strategies, military commitments, and cultural identity in the face of contact with hundreds of alien civilizations. Colonies sought greater autonomy, while Earth tried to maintain unified human policy. Military leaders pushed for continued buildup, while civilian leadership advocated for diplomatic priorities. David concluded his report with a reflection that captured humanity's position perfectly. We've proven we can fight, negotiate, and contribute to galactic civilization. Now we need to prove we can maintain that position over time, through changing circumstances and evolving challenges. The treaty gave us a seat at the table. Our actions over the coming decades will determine whether we keep it. On Earth, President Vasquez read David's report and smiled. Humanity had entered the galactic stage not as supplicants or conquerors, but as equals who earned their position through strength and wisdom combined. The Galactic Council had ordered humanity to submit or face war, and humanity had smiled and changed the entire conversation. The chaos that erupted wasn't destruction, but transformation. A galaxy comfortable with its established order suddenly confronted new possibilities. New challenges, new opportunities for cooperation and conflict alike. And throughout it all, humanity adapted, learned, competed, and cooperated with the same energy that had carried them. From caves to starships and a cosmic eye blink, the galaxy would never be the same. And neither would humanity, but perhaps, together, They could build something better than either could achieve alone. The experiment had begun. Only time would reveal its ultimate outcome. Retry Claude can make mistakes. Please double-check responses.